It's now time to tune into Folkways FM. I've been told they're currently on the move. Apparently the staff member who'd been singing in the choir at St David's was involved in some kind of a kerfuffle in the cloisters and was actually asked to leave. Leave they did. The ship is back on the move again. I've been informed they're currently somewhere near Anglesey as I speak. It's a funny old world. Let's try and pick them up. Welcome to the month of March and happy St David's Day and Shrove Tuesday. March, or Mensis Martius in Latin, is named, of course, after Mars, the Roman god of war, as well as an agricultural guardian. March once marked the beginning of the year in the early Roman calendar, as well as the return to active farming, military engagements, and sailing. Across Europe, we find this month named after Mars. In these islands, Marta in Irish, Immasht in Scots Gaelic, and Meath in Welsh, Meant in Manx, and in Cornish it's Mismerth. Anglo-Saxons knew this month as Hredmanath, which was dedicated to the goddess Hreda or Rheda. It is St David's Day today. This falls on the day the saint died in 589, but has only been celebrated since the 12th century, when St David was canonized. Folks traditionally remember him by wearing a leek on this day, which, although somewhat fell out of fashion, does appear to be making a comeback. You'll often hear too, the leek wearing commemorates a great Welsh victory over the Saxons. Welsh soldiers were ordered to wear the vegetables on their helmet, so goes the story, so they would recognise their countrymen during the fighting. The origin is also dramatised in Shakespeare's Henry V, when the Welsh captain remarked that Welsh soldiers fought a battle, quote, in a garden where leeks did grow. Some Welsh regiments today continue to celebrate Wales's National Day by wearing a leek in their cap badges. There's also an old superstition that sleeping with a leek under her pillow on St David's Day would enable a woman to dream of her future lover. Do you remember in Folkway's second episode on Midsummer, there was a segment on prophetic dreams, where there's a tradition of placing various objects under one's pillow to dream of your partner-to-be. I just thought this was an interesting crossover, where this practice is not only seen at Midsummer, but also Halloween too, amongst other festivities. It is also Shrove Tuesday, though it's hard to imagine this now. Shrovetide was once the biggest and wildest festival of early spring. Its origins lay in the early Middle Ages, along with those of the long fast of Lent. People used to flock to the confessional to be shriven, or shriven, great word. You been shriven lately? Shrive meaning to administer the sacrament of confession, to absolve. This took place before the great fast of Lent commenced. Though we don't have the equivalent of the Mardi Gras in France, of course, we did once have something of the same kind of festivity, as this old account collected by P.H. Ditchfield records. Some run about the streets attired like monks, and some like kings, accompanied with pomp and guard and other stately things. Some like wild beasts do run abroad in skins that divers be, arrayed and eke with loathsome shapes that dreadful are to see. They counterfeit both bears and wolves, and lions fierce in sight, and raging bulls. Some play the cranes with wings and stilts upright. Our modern carnival is a much less riotous affair, and generally resolves itself around eating pancakes. Yep, that's it. There is an ancient tradition, however, where a bell is rung which is called the Pancake Bell. This formerly called the faithful to the confessional. For a long time at Culworth, Northamptonshire, and Crowle, Lincolnshire, the Pancake Bell was still heard. Do you know of anywhere it's still rung today? I know St Mary's in the Wood, Morley, in its new location at Commercial Street, still rings the bell to signify Lent, But if you know of somewhere, please email the show, folkwayschannel@gmail.com. English children, namely of southern and midland counties, had a vast array of incredibly similar rhymes to mark Pancake Day. Here's one from Bolden, Oxfordshire. Pitter-pat, the pan's hot, I become a shroving. Catch a fish afore the net, that's better than nothing. Eggs, lard, and flowers dear, that makes me come a shroving here. I've got to point out, it's best not to annoy these gangs of youths, as they might target you if displeased, which might be done by throwing stones at your door and singing, skit, scat, take this and take that, or by tying a stone to the door handle, which of course this podcast does not endorse. I'm sure I'm not the only one getting trick-or-treat vibes here. Pay up or else. A lot of traditions throughout all the year do have a theme of youngish folks going from door to door, either in costume or singing rhymes, and essentially, all pomp and ritual aside, asking for scraps. Not a bad idea. But where did eating pancakes actually come from, though? So, Lent was kept by a strict abstinence from meat all through the 40 days, and it was customary to use up all the drippings and lard in the making of pancakes. To consume all, it was usual to call in the apprentice boys and others about the house, and they were summoned by a bell which naturally became known as the Pancake Bell. Abandon your post and get thee to the griddle. So we've got the bell being rung in the house to gather everyone at the table, and we've got it being rung in the church to call you to the confessional. St. Piran's Day on 5th of March is the National Day of Cornwall. March is chock full of saint days, as we've got St. Patrick's Day then on the 17th. Irish families would traditionally attend church in the morning and celebrate in the afternoon. Lenten prohibitions against the consumption of meat were waived, and people would dance, drink, and feast on the traditional meal of Irish bacon and cabbage. Folkways will be exploring who St. Patrick, St. Piran, and St. David were in future episodes, where there is so much to cover. As you may know, in the Wheel of the Year we have 4 fire festivals: Imolc, which we looked at last month, Beltane, Lunasa, and Samhain. In between these there are the solar festivals, which are the solstices and the equinoxes. On what falls as the 20th of March this year, it is, of course, the first of these, the spring equinox, also known as Ostara. This is the point when, from here, the hours of daylight become greater than those of darkness, and where we can truly feel spring knocking. If we imagine a set of scales, they are perfectly balanced right now, and each day they tip a fraction more in day's favour as night lessens its grip, something which, in the depths of winter, for our ancestors may have felt like it would never happen. As I mentioned, this equinox is also known as Ostara, a word coming from the Anglo-Saxon goddess name Istro. In the northern hemisphere, the sun rises or dawns in the east, a word also derived from Eoster, spelt E-O-S-T-R-E, and what does that word sound like? This is a time when the land is planted with seed and will soon bring forth, we hope, a bountiful yield. See last month's episode on the Acrebot if you're interested. Each day now the trees grow heavier with bud and blossom. Think about the sap flowing up those gnarled trunks, waking them from their winter sleep. The next date for our diaries is the 27th of March, which is Mothering Sunday. This arose from an ancient ordinance of the church requiring the priests and people to visit the mother church of the district on Mothering Sunday, and long ago this ecclesiastical custom became generally associated with a pleasant gathering of families and the renewing of the ties of home life. It was customary for children who were absent from home in service to visit their parents on this day. For many, it was the first opportunity to go home in the working year. The young folk took as a present for their parents a small cake known as a simnel cake. I remember my mum making these in the past, which, if you look at that tradition, is actually the wrong way round. If you woke up in Galway today, the sun rose at 7:23 and set at 6:14. Glasgow sun rose at 8 minutes past 7 and set at 5:51. In Guildford, going for all the G's there, sun rose at 6:47, go Guildford, and set at 5:42. We have gained buckets of light this month. As an example, this time last month in Guildford, the sun wasn't rising until 20 to 8. The new moon is Wednesday, March the 2nd, and it will be waxing until the 18th. Here's one for your diaries. On the 12th to the 13th of March, if you look up, the waxing gibbous moon passes below Castor and Pollux. So if you look directly above the moon, you will spy the twins. Venus is also notably bright this month, and you should spy Earth's sister easily, therefore, in the mornings. Names for March's full moon on the 18th include the plough moon, chaste moon, and Lenten moon. So that's the heavens. What about the hedgerows? Many favourite foraging plants are first at their best in March. Alexanders have begun to produce the long but not yet fibrous side shoots, a non-native plant that was brought here by the Romans as a winter feed for their horses. Stinging nettles form low blankets of new leaves. Sea kale gives us its first taste, and in the middle of March it's time to tap birch trees for their sap. The hedgerows really begin to wake up this month, with many birds building nests. Butterflies and queen white-tailed bumblebees just out of hibernation may also be spotted. So too will bats, who have essentially run out of their reserves at this point, and you might see them flitting around the hedgerows looking for some grub. In the garden, we've got a piece of advice from the 1683 English housewife, which reads, "In March, if the moon be new, sow garlic, chervil, marjoram, white poppy, double marigolds, thyme, and violets." The new moon is on Wednesday, so if you were planning on planting any of those, you have the English housewife's full blessing, which I know is very important to you. In terms of general gardening, you can start making direct sowings this month if the weather is mild. Think onions, shallots, and early potatoes. For flowers, prune your roses, plant early flowering bulbs, and something I got from Good Old Gardener's World is to sow native wildflower seeds in trays or modules to produce plants for your own mini meadow. The bees will thank you. As a closing note, for the next 3 months until June, the sun is reigning supreme and is growing in power every day. You have many, many hours of daylight and warmth stretching ahead of you this year. Yes, even in these northerly isles. Go and make the most of it. Now it's time for the third instalment of The Magic Apple Tree by Susan Hill. You'll find a link to buy a copy in the show notes. The blossom opened slowly, slowly on the apple tree. One day the boughs are grey, though with the swellings of the leaves to come visible if you look closely. The next day, and the next, here and there, a speck of white, and then a sprinkling, as though someone has thrown a handful of confetti up into the air and let it fall, anyhow, over the branches. The weather is grey, it is cold still. The blossom looks like snow against the sky. And then, one morning, there is snow, 5 or 6 inches of it after a terrible stormy night, and rising from it, set against the snow-filled sky, the little tree is puffed out with its blossom, a crazy sight like some surreal painting, and all around us, in every other garden, there is the white apple and the pink cherry blossom, thick as cream, in a winter landscape. And another day, just before the blossom withers and shrinks back into the first opening leaves, there is the softest of spring mornings. At last it is touched by the early sun, and the apple tree looks as it should look if the world went aright in springtime.